Okay, in this video, we're going to be working on smoothing out our pumpkins. Okay, so we're making jack-o'-lanterns, and one of the first things you want to do is go over and use your thumbs to smooth out as much as you can. You want to do this with clean hands. So we're going to go around first, and we're going to do long, continuous motions with our thumbs to try and get them all smooth. Now, this is assuming that you have already used a paddle, that you have your lines, your indentations for your pumpkin that you put on just by taking a wood rib and rolling that indentation in and then smoothing it back with your fingers. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on as our kind of like base expectation for these pumpkins. So you're going to go around first with your thumbs. Now, this pumpkin is still damp, but it's a teeny bit dry. It's not quite leather hard. And so we want to like not put direct inward pressure on it because we don't want to like push things in too much when we can't push them back out. See, we have this enclosed so we can put the stem on it. So we don't really have enough room to get our hand in there and push back if we make an indentation that we're not happy with. Okay, so this is ready now for some tidying up. And so these are the two tools we're really going to be using, a wood rib and a metal rib. This one's serrated on the edge, but it doesn't matter because we're not using that part, we're using the straight part. So what I'm going to do to really get this nice and tidy on the sides is I'm going to put it on my lap. Now, if you're putting any clay piece in your lap, the first thing you need to do is make sure that the apron or whatever you're wearing is like doesn't have a bunch of chunks on it. Okay, so here's the apron I have on, and I'm going to check it right for any clay chunks. It can have clay on it, it just can't have big bits that are gonna leave marks on your project. So I'm gonna take my pumpkin, I'm gonna put it in my lap with the fabric smoothed out, so I'm also not making wrinkles with the fabric. And I'm just looking to make sure it's on screen. Okay, it is. So now you can see my pumpkin's been sitting on the front desk and some people have put their hands on it. So there's some random fingerprints in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my wood rib and I'm going to have a sponge. And the sponge is never going to be wiped on my project because I don't want to make the walls of my project weak by getting them wet. So all I'm going to do is gently take the wood rib and I'm going to smooth an area with it, making sure not to leave any edge marks. And as soon as clay starts building up on that, I'm just going to wipe it off either with my fingers or the sponge. And so I'm just going to go around and I'm going to smooth my pumpkin. And each section I do, once I've done it with the wood rib, I'm going to go back and do it with my fingers. Okay, that's going to get all the little fingerprint marks off of this. And for this assignment, we remember that we are going to want to have either 3D face elements that project out. Think like eyebrows, lips, parts of noses, or we want to have surface texture. So I'm probably going to do both on mine because I think that's fun. But before I add any surface texture, I have to make sure that my surface is flat and tidy. Okay. And so this is how you're going to do it. If you scrape out any of your pumpkin indentations, you just put them right back in, clean them up. Okay. And you'll notice the motions I'm doing with my fingers are long. Okay. Long and smooth motions with fingers. Okay. I'm not using the corners or edges of this tool because I don't want to make new lines that I have to clean up. And I'm just being as gentle as I can. And so this is what I would do with a pumpkin that still was kind of damp. If my pumpkin is more like leather hard when I start doing this, the tool I will use is this metal rib. So the metal rib, the cool thing about it is you can take it and you can curve it, right? So you're going to curve it to the same angle of your pumpkin in your hand, and then you're going to come along and do the same thing we did with the metal rib, but with super light pressure. And you've got to wipe it off all the time. And this is almost kind of shaving the outer layer off. So I'm going to do that with the rib, and then I'm going to go back with my fingers and I'm going to tidy it up. Okay. So that's how we're going to approach cleaning up our pumpkin. Okay. Now, once you've done that all the way around, then you're ready to draw your face on just like you had it on your thumbnails, and ready to start potentially carving into this to get the face elements that you had planned for your pumpkin. Before we do that, we're going to talk for a minute about doing our stem, right? So I have my pumpkin, it's ready to receive its stem. I'm going to put it on slightly off center and then curve it back. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that pumpkin stems don't just come straight up. That's not how they go in nature, where they go straight up from your pumpkin in a straight line, right? This is something that's organic, and so you want to have more kind of curving forms. Okay, so I'm going to set my pumpkin down for a minute because I want to talk about making your stem. Okay, so I have some clay that is ready to go to be made into a pumpkin stem. Okay, so thinking about the size of my pumpkin, that stem would be huge, right? So I'm going to get it kind of shaped, and then I'm going to pinch it a little smaller. Okay, so I'm going to just roll it between my hands and maybe a little on the desk, which might be off screen. Okay, and I'm going to get my kind of pumpkin shape, my pumpkin stem shape, sorry. So I took off about that much. So I'm going to be comparing it to my pumpkin and saying, are you the right size? You know, and I want it to be kind of wider at the bottom. And think about how big I want it to be. So probably about like that. Okay. Now I want to texture this bad boy. Okay. So, and I'm going to push into the texture quite a bit to give it more shape. And so I'm also going to be opening that up. So we have in our classroom this really cool piece of driftwood that's right here. Okay. So I'm going to use this piece of wood to get texture on this by just rolling it onto that piece of wood like a stamp. Okay. So I'm going to look at the direction of the lines, decide how I want it to relate to the stem shape that I've made. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to roll it onto here to get it having some interesting wood textures. And it doesn't need to be perfect, right? You can see it really quickly and easily gives you some very interesting texture that looks like it's organic. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Now, another thing we need to remember is that we can't have anything that we're going to fire that has too thick an area. So I will take a tool and hollow this thing out and then attach it to the lid of my pumpkin. And so I'm going to do that early before I cut it off. The other thing too is we want the inside edge of that to look really organic. And so we want it to look like it's cut off and has an opening. Okay, so I'm going to take a needle tool and I'm going to kind of give this a cut. We're going to point this back at the table. Here we go. So I'm going to give this kind of a cut. And I'm trying not to crush any of my texture. I'm also going to twist it a little because I want it to spin, the texture to spin around it. Now I'm going to take whatever tools I have handy and I'm going to make some textural indentations into this. Okay. And these will receive some glaze in them and stuff like that. But I want them to look and feel kind of organic. And so I'm going to indent them more. And make sure you don't trap air holes in here, you guys. And if you've ever seen pumpkin vines, how they grow, they're kind of hollow inside and fibrous. And so this is going to kind of mimic that effect a little bit. So I had some tools like this too that have kind of rounded shapes in them. And so what I'm thinking about being careful on is not leaving any pointed edges in here. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of do some of that. I'm going to pat it down a little bit so we have that texture. Okay, Now, before I can attach this on my pumpkin, one of the things that I need to do is flare the base a little bit. So I'm being gentle to not lose my texture, and I'm just going to kind of flare this out a little. Then I'm going to hollow it. So I'm using a ribbon tool as almost like a drill. Okay, so I'm going to hollow that out so that it's not a solid block of clay that's going to not fire well. Okay. Very quick and easy way to make that clay thinner on the inside so that we can attach it. Okay. And I want to get most of the way to the top, like up to right here. Okay. And so the way I can see how far in I am is just stick that right there and measure it and say, okay, that's pretty good. If I go too far, I'll punch through the top, and I don't want to do that. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to splay this out so it's wider at the bottom. Okay. I'm going to cut this a little just to make it more uneven so it looks a little more natural. Right, so we're going to roll those in. Okay, so I'm blending my edges. And those points will get blended in when I attach it. So I'm keeping my work area clean. I'm getting cut a little bit, so I'm going to get them out of my way. I'm going to keep working on this. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before I slip and score this on top is I'm going to take it and do a little bit of texture on it with some tools kind of following the texture that was already there from that piece of wood. Okay. So a tool that I use all the time and really like is the wood knife. So I'm going to get in here with the wood knife. I'm going to do some tidying, and then I'm going to kind of follow the lines that I have up to the top and put some textures back in to make sure that this is nice and textured. And anything I do, I'm going to blend and get rid of any little clay bits or burrs, of course, with clean tools. Get everything nice and tidy, and then that's ready to go on. I'm also going to, like I said, curve it a little. Okay, and then that's going to be ready to attach, which I'm going to do very gently. So I will just attach that on there and we'll be ready to roll. Okay, happy smoothing, everyone.